Combat in Terraria is pretty simple. It's easy for most players to understand and figure out how to make their character more powerful. You could go more depth and find new and more effective ways to take out foes. When you boil it down, however, you hit the enemy and it takes damage. But what if you didn't want to do that? What if instead you wanted to make your enemies suffer? That's where debuffs come in. Terraria has a plethora of these debuffs that deal damage over time. Usually players don't think much of them due to their lackluster results, but with enough dedication and bashing your head against a brick wall, you can center an entire build around them. The more we're able to set things on fire, the better. Now of course, this isn't the most practical way to play Terraria. What? Did he come here expecting actual good advice? Don't be ridiculous. This is for fun and seeing how far we can take this idea. You want to know what is practical though? Slapping that subscribe button. Haha, woo! Nailed it. But, please? Let's talk about that first. The standard flamethrower and the elf melter are the most obvious picks for setting the world aflame. They are ranged weapons and benefit from any class boost you have and excel at clearing groups. They use gel as ammunition, so you'll almost always have fuel for these things. Flamethrowers inflict the regular fire debuff, which deals 4 damage a second. Not great on its own, but unique damage over time effects stack with each other. Using more debuffs equals more burning. Frost Armor has a set bonus that lets ranged and melee attacks dish out frostbite, dealing 25 damage a second. Not too bad, and the added colors look nice. Unfortunately, there's not much else we can do from here. No other item can improve flamethrowers any further, and that just won't do. So let's back up and try this again. This is the Shadow Flame Knife. It's an early hard mode weapon dropped by the Goblin Summoner. It's very similar to the Magic Dagger, but it has some things that make it special. It bounces off targets, potentially creating devastating chain reactions, and it comes with its own effect, Shadow Flame. Not crazy compared to what we had before, so what makes it better than flamethrowers then? 1. It's a melee weapon. 2. Stabbing people. Melee users have a lot of items at their disposal that can be used for our advantage. That frost armor we used before, that works with the Shadow Flame Knife, so be sure to wear some. Next up is the Magma Stone, or its upgrade, the Fire Gauntlet. For the longest time, these two accessories weren't too impressive, and some even considered them downgrades of other items. Recently though, they were given many buffs that not only made them amazing for melee loadouts, but gave them their own debuff. Hellfire. This spicy one adds another 15 damage per second. Last on our list are flasks. These items have been around for almost 9 years, and yet I feel like many don't use them. They're cheap to make and only require an imbuing station from the Witch Doctor and a few other materials. For this fire build, we'll be using the Flask of Cursed Flames that lets melee attacks do Cursed Inferno. If you're not part of the Cult of Piss, and don't insist playing on Crimson Worlds, this debuff does 24 damage per second. Even if you don't want to try this godforsaken loadout, consider using this flask. With all that, we have 4 different flavors of fire: hot, cold, purple, and lime. Adding up all the effects we have so far totals to 79 damage per second. This isn't reflected in the numbers flying off the enemies, but their frequency increases with damage. It's weird, so believe me when I say that you're doing more. All these options are available before killing a single hard mode boss, and you know what? You could do worse. Regular enemies will literally melt before your eyes, and it has okay sustained damage on stronger targets. We're not done yet though. There are still a few debuffs I want to cover, starting with poison. No! Venom, or Acid Venom, is a really good effect we can tack onto our loadout. It does the most damage of any debuff we've talked about so far at 30 per second. A great thing to have, even if it's just by itself. The issue is that you can only get a flask of it after you beat Plantera, so if you want to imbue your knife with Venom, you'll have to wait until you're pretty far into the game. You also can't stack it with Cursed Inferno, since you can only have one active flask at a time. However, the 2 spider staves are capable of using Venom and can be acquired right at the start of hard mode. It may not look like fire, so it doesn't fit the theme of our build, but trust me, they're burning on the inside. For something a little less useful, you could try utilizing the oiled debuff. This effect is applied when enemies are hit with explosive trap sentries, but only while wearing the Huntress or Red Riding armor sets. Everything here can be bought from the Tavern Keep. Oiled is strange. It does nothing on its own, but if the target is on fire, the oil will combust and deal 25 damage a second. So it's identical to the frost armor we've been using, but without any of the melee benefits. Unless you're somehow able to rapidly switch between both sets and keep both frostbite and oil at the same time, probably not worth using this. I guess it works with flamethrowers if you still want to use those. While this build isn't too bad at the beginning of hard mode, it really falls off as you progress and is near useless in the end game. Our dinky little Shadow Flame knife can only do so much. I think it's about time we replace it. Start the lunar events and destroy the solar pillar. Nab yourself a few solar fragments and craft the Daybreak. This javelin hurts more and flies further than the knife. A huge improvement in every way. It also has its own debuff, Daybroken. The Solar Eruption has this debuff too, and is probably the better weapon, but what it can't do is stack the effect. For every Daybreak Spear stuck inside an enemy, it'll deal 25 damage per second. You could have up to 8 stuck at once for a massive 200 damage per second. Everything you touch will be engulfed in flames. Combine this with all the items we've used so far, the Molten Gauntlet, Frost Armor, a Flask of Venom or Cursed Flames, and alternate between the Shadow Flame Knife and the Daybreak for the highest possible damage over time at 285 per second. Well, maybe it's not the highest possible. We didn't use oil or poison in the final build, and there are still a bunch of debuffs I could talk about that have other effects aside from dealing damage. There are some that cause foes to drop more money, and others that lower their defense. There are even a few purely cosmetic ones, like Confetti or Stinky, which is what you are. The loadout we covered today isn't the best thing ever, but I'd still recommend trying some of these items out and see how you like them. Just remember to stay safe and don't set yourself on fire.